place come to mean to you personally?
Well, it's the home of the people of Canada,
Right.
first of all. And we, this past year, I think, had over 350,000 people through it. It's open 365 days of the year during the daytime hours.
That's been a very important point for
Yes.
you, to make sure that you invite Canadians here.
Yes.
Why?
This represents a part of our overall crown, our government, and people should feel at home with the institution, and they should feel at home in this place where Governor Generals come and go, and you hope that the institution becomes even stronger and more understandable in the minds of Canadian citizens, and that one uses this office as a bit of a podium to try to reinforce those fundamental values of Canadians, the fact that we are an experiment in innovation, that you can make diversity and inclusiveness work for you as a society.
I have been going over your installation speech from 2010. You delivered that stirring call to service.
There is much work to be done to fully achieve our vision of a smart and caring nation.
Is Canada today that country? Is it the country you dreamed of?
Well, we're certainly on the right trajectory, Heather, with, I think, the right values of being smart and caring. Smart in the sense that equality of opportunity should reach all of our people, especially through our educational system. And we've got some challenges and gaps there. And also the caring part, that we are a nation of people that have looked after one another. Peace, order, and good government is a fundamental theme of our Constitution for good reason. But like all things Canadian, we can do better.
You worked very hard at that during your 7 years. You wanted to be the bridge to bring people together to create that nation. Mm-hmm. That we didn't quite get where you wanted. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think you ever do. That when you have ideals as we have for this country, it's a journey with very often 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. And I think that will continue to be the case, particularly because we have to evolve with changing circumstances. That's the nature of things. But I think Canada is a country that is very conscious of the fundamental qualities that make us up. We must reinforce those always, and I think that's an important role of this office, that is an office that does not have substantial power, not at all political, but to remind us who we are and always to call for the better angels of our nature and to ensure those better angels reign.
Because there were moments during your tenure when Canada saw things that were anything but caring. Mm-hmm. I think of the Quebec Mosque attack, the attack here on Parliament Hill, various expressions of racism, whether anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic. How concerned are you about those kinds of incidents and what they may portend? Well,
those are very real issues, and one must deal with them from a security point of view, and more broadly, one must deal with them from the point of view of fundamental Canadian values. We are inclusive, we are a tolerant people, we believe in rule of law, and we believe in equality of opportunity for all of our people, and very often those kinds of hostile and hatred manifestations come from circumstances where those opportunities are not as present as they should be. When we look at the globe at large, there are more conflicts than we ever want to have going on. We have 65 million displaced persons around the world today. That's more than we've had since just after the Second World War. So there are plenty of things to occupy our minds about trouble, and I think it's important for all of us living in this blessed land to work pretty hard to show that Canadian values can work.
Have there been occasions where you would have liked to have spoken out more forcefully on those or other important issues? Because you've often joked about having to speak in governor generalities.
Sure, yes, indeed.
How difficult has it been?
Well, it's the nature of the task. This is an office that is removed from politics and should be. And one must be conscious, I think, of understanding what the limits of the office are and not trespassing beyond those. From time to time, we've perhaps been closer to those limits. For example, concussions has been a major concern about me, and healthy sport for our young people. This is an area of some degree of controversy, and we've waded into it a little bit. And other things where you know that it is not your role to pronounced. It may be the role of the courts. It may be the role of an elected federal government. It may be the role of a provincial government, etc. And if one is going to ensure that the office is respected for its integrity and its impartiality and the absence of politics, then one makes those choices and hews to them.
Of all of these 7 years, what has been your pinch me moment?
I love this country. I've always thought it was a good country. I think my wife and I didn't appreciate how good it was until we began to travel so much from community to community. Last week we were 3 days in the Arctic Ocean, visiting that vast land, seeing these remarkably resilient people. We have a medal we call the Sovereign's Medal from Volunteerism that was languishing a little bit, and this past year we've awarded 1,000 of those, and these are to the unsung heroes in the community, the people who never asked for any recognition, but for 30 years they've been running Meals on Wheels, you name it. When you meet those people, you come to realize how many good individuals there are in this country and how their goodness is the glue that holds our communities together and makes them healthier.
Back to your installation. At the time, a newspaper columnist wrote, "It's hard to define a Canadian. You just have to know what it means." You get the impression Mr. Johnston knows. Have your experiences as Governor General changed your understanding of what it means to be a Canadian?
Yes.
How so?
It's more complex than I thought. We are even more diverse than I thought. Change is occurring more quickly than I thought. The world has become more complicated than I thought. All of those, I think, are particular challenges, and I think we have to be resilient in responding to those challenges, while at the same time recognizing that there's some fundamental values that have served us pretty clearly, and being smart and caring would be one of those fundamental values.
One of the things that you wrote yourself about being Canadian was in your Letters to a Nation, and you said that one of our finest characteristics is we never shy away from learning the truth about ourselves, good or bad. We are not a people who tell pleasant lies to ourselves. Is there still a hard truth Canadians need to confront?
Well, I hope that we have maintained that spirit of honest frankness about our country, never losing any love for it, always being conscious and proud in the accomplishments that we've made, and they are many and they are mighty, but it's a road that is not finished, and in some ways ours is the road less traveled. We're doing somewhat unconventional things, that diversity and inclusiveness and substantial levels of immigration can work for the country. At long last, I think, earnest efforts to ensure Indigenous peoples have the opportunity in this country that later settlers have had in this country. Those are things that we must continue to confront and deal with, and it begins with a pretty frank appraisal of what our shortcomings are.
Will there be true reconciliation?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I certainly hope so, but I also believe it.
And what will that look like to you?
Well, number one, it begins with an understanding of the place of Indigenous peoples in this nation, going back eons and eons. Number two, looking at this land, Canada, in a somewhat different light than our Western European civilization has looked at it. Number three, really taking the notions of inclusiveness and diversity for real. And it applies to our Indigenous people, with much to learn from them, and much that all of us have to do to be sure that the equality of opportunity that I had from a very modest background in Northern Ontario, my children and grandchildren have, is also possible for Indigenous young children, whether they're on a reserve or not a reserve. That's unfinished business with a capital U and a capital B, and it's unfinished business that requires the attention, engagement, and passion of all Canadians.
Do you ever get used to being called Your Excellency?
No.
Really?
No.
Family, what did they think?
Oh, my children and grandchildren have very interesting names for me. Probably the most presentable one that I can discuss with you is I'm Grandpa Book.
Yes.
Because my 14 grandchildren see me as the person that reads books to them, and so they call me Grandpa Book.
But they don't call you Your Excellency.
They do not.
No.
They do not. And I suppose when people use that term, Heather, I understand they're paying respect to the office, and I think that's a Canadian custom. It's a good thing. Meanwhile, my wife and I are very down-to-earth people, and she has names for me other than Your Excellency. I call her my Commander-in-Chief.
You won't tell me what she calls you?
No.
Queen.
God bless her.
You've known her for a long time, longer than almost any other Governor General. So what is your relationship? Are you friends?
Well, my children would say she is something. She's a very, very special person. I think not as well understood as I wish she would be. She has a wonderful sense of humor. She's very down to earth. She's a very warm person and a delight to be with. I think we've been with her, not the number of times, 9 or 10 times, and you never leave a discussion with her without feeling a little bit wiser yourself about the world, because she's seen so much history, more history from kind of first-hand encounter than anybody living at the present time.
What's the most unusual situation you found yourself in with Her Majesty?
Well, there are many, and I'm always a little careful. The conversations we have, I guess, are private, and I write to her on a regular basis. And
you still do you?
I do, yes. What I can say this much is when we first visited the Queen and Prince Philip at Balmoral, we were lucky that they were in their Scottish estate, and they secure the outside of 80,000 acres, but inside it's very, very informal. And at the end of the weekend we spent with them, as she was seeing us off, she said, "I do read letters, you know." And I said, "Well, I will write to Your Majesty, and when you find my letters dull and boring, you let me know and cease and desist." So the last one was about a month ago, and I said, "We're getting close to cease and desist." But you know, one of the funny moments that I think I can disclose is we went there with every stitch of formal clothing you could possibly imagine, and of course we never put a single thing on.
At Balmoral?
At Balmoral. It's a country estate.
Yes.
It's a country home, really. And Sharon loves horses, and the Queen, I can't say she loves horses any more than people, because she loves people, but she loves her horses. So the first morning, Saturday morning, came down for breakfast, and Sharon and the Queen, of course, were going to the stables. Sharon didn't have any shoes. The Queen goes upstairs, comes down, and says, "My dear, we have the same size feet, wear these." So she wore the Queen's stable shoes for the whole weekend.
Oh my goodness, these are the things.
And nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt. Does Canada still need the Queen? Every time I do a subject on you or something on the Queen, people say, you know, that's such a quaint, retrograde notion.
Sure. The
Queen, head of state. Yeah. You know, we're a mature country. We can stand on our own.
Well, the rule of law is quaint in a sense. I suppose it goes back to Solon or Dracon or some of the greats from our past. But as I say, the constitutional government that we have is the product of 1,000 years of evolution, with changes as appropriate as they've been required by circumstances. And I'm sure that Canadians will continue to evolve, and if we find some things in our traditions, in our conventions that are out of date, then we'll summon the will to mend them. I'd be much happier, for example, if our Constitution were more articulated. Some of the powers that the Governor General holds are theoretically somewhat inimical to parliamentary democracy, but they're either not exercised at all or would only be exercised in the most exceptional circumstances. We should be clear of what those powers are, and we should be clear about the conventions of our government, minority governments, and what happens in an election period when we're supposed to be in a caretaker government, no new initiatives. Those are all things that are important to spell out, I think.
We don't understand it, perhaps we don't appreciate it as fully as you think we should. Entre nous, do you binge watch The Crown?
Yes.
You do?
Are we still on?
Seriously?
Yes, twice.
Twice? All through the twice?
All through.
And is it like what you've experienced?
Well, are we on camera now?
Yes, we are.
The Crown must win. Must always win.
Well, number one, the vice-regal family are the lieutenant governors and the commissioners, and we have similar functions, so we share a lot. Some of those conventions that I spoke about a moment ago, we've done in a table of questions that could arise and answers. And I use a stream of independent advisors on those matters because I also am advised by the Privy Council office and Department of Justice lawyers. but I want the independent stream, so we share that with them. And yes, I asked all of them if they hadn't to watch The Crown, and I guess what I said is that there's a very substantial basis in fact for the stories.
Okay.
Not all the details, but substantial basis in fact.
What about the grandchildren? I mean, holy hide and seek.
They love it here. First of all, they love the big house, as they call it, because they can hide in those many rooms and their parents can't find them for hours and take them home. And then just over here, you might not be able to see it in the cameras, is a playground with a little dollhouse.
Beautiful.
And sandboxes and swings, and we do a lot of soccer and other things out here in these fields with the grandchildren. They love it. They run and run and run. And skating on the rink, of course.
Such a close family. Hard moments though, personally, in terms of moments missed or sacrifices made?
Well, family's been very important to my wife. I suppose we all say that, but we have 5 daughters, all in public service. I don't think anything we've done to influence them that way, but that's who they are, and 14 marvelous grandchildren. And I say all the important things in life I've learned from my children, and now I'm relearning from my grandchildren. So we have I suppose, a relationship, a rapport that for us is very precious. And my daughters are very quick to criticize their dad. And grandchildren are a little more circumspect. They call me Grandpa Book because I read books to them. But the eldest is 14. She's getting close to the age where as a teenager she'll have to raise her grandparents as well as her parents.
What do you hope they take from your having been Governor General?
Well, I suppose if I look at my daughters, they've been very fortunate that they've been raised in a degree of affluence, but they are people that really believe in diversity and inclusiveness, and they all have, I think, a sense of public service. And so, you know, good family, strong family values are very important, but so are relationships with your neighbors and relationships with people who aren't quite your neighbors, a little more removed, but you have to work every day to be sure their lot in life is improved. So I guess that would be it. Secondly, I guess happiness in oneself. I'm a person of faith, so that's important to me. It's my rock, and my children and grandchildren will decide what degree of that is useful in their lives or not, but I believe we're put on the earth for a purpose, and that purpose is well served if you can think from me to we, from beyond the first person singular to the first person plural, and embrace and engage other people. And I see that in my daughters, and I like to see we're seeing it in our grandchildren.
What's your next purpose? Because I don't think you've announced formally what you're going to do next, have you?
Well, I joke, Heather, that I've never held a job. I'm on a 1-year leave of absence from my law firm for 53 years. I say that they used to say, well, when you've got the courage to face the real world, come, we'll teach you how to practice law. I terrify them now that I might.
You might go back?
You never know. I'll continue to do legal things, public policy things. I don't think I'll bill my time as a lawyer, but I've always been engaged in public policy stuff, chairing a task force or whatever. I'll do that. I'll do some pro bono work that's pretty important to me. And I'm very interested in Canada's place in the world, so I'll be encouraging international trade, international investment.
I begin by saying thank you to Her Majesty the Queen, the Prime Minister, and the Canadian people for this call to service. My wife and I accept it with joy as we contemplate the role of Canada in the years ahead, and with gratitude at the opportunity to serve as the Queen's representative in Canada.
In that installation speech, you said that you and your wife Sharon had accepted your position with joy.
Yeah.
Is there joy again
Sure.
as the term comes to an end?
Even more.
Really?
Oh, lucky. I mean, it's a gift to do something like this for 7 years, and I'd like to think that you strengthen the institution. You take on any job, and no matter how you find the institution, you want to be sure it's stronger when you leave than when it came out. But we've been so blessed to see great people in this country doing really, really good things, and to have a chance to put our arm around their shoulder and say, bless you, bless you, keep on, and encourage the rest of us. So yeah, it's been a joy.
And you've been a great teacher for many. I've learned from you and have been inspired by you. Thank you for our many conversations. It's been an honor.
And it has been an honor and a joy for me, Heather, and may there be many more.